Hello, my name is Keith Jones. Historians have a duty to faithfully reconstruct history from an investigation of primary sources. Today, I want to tell you about the evangelist with the most appropriate name in history, Billy Sunday, and also his secret weapon. Now, the common reaction upon hearing that name is to say that can't be his real name. It's just too appropriate, right? Well, sort of. The real family name was Sontag, and Billy's grandfather adopted the name Sunday after immigrating to the United States from Germany. However, Sontag is simply German for Sunday. So yes, Billy Sunday was his real name. There are many aspects to the historical Billy Sunday. He had a difficult childhood. He grew up in an orphanage. He was a popular professional athlete who experienced a Christian conversion and became a successful traveling revivalist who was known for his showmanship. I'll talk a little bit about all of that, but I want to focus on Billy Sunday's secret weapon, his wife, Nell. Now, William Ashley Sunday was an evangelist in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, so he was in his heyday around or a little bit before, over 100 years ago. He was born in 1862 to German immigrants in Iowa. His father died while serving in the Union Army, and his mother fell on hard times and had to send Billy to grow up in an orphanage. There, his superior athletic skills emerged, and he began playing professional baseball for the Chicago White Sox in 1883. Now, he was about an average batter, but he was an excellent outfielder and base runner, and he was very popular with the fans in Chicago. In 1886, he was saved by a street preacher named Harry Monroe from the Pacific Garden Mission in Chicago. Monroe went on to be the longtime superintendent of the Pacific Garden Mission, and when he died in 1916, the headline for his obituary in the Chicago Tribune was that he was the man who converted Billy Sunday. He met Nell Thompson later that year. Billy was instantly smitten, and the two married in 1888, despite her father's reservation about her marrying a ball player. And in 1891, Billy turned down a $3,500 a year baseball contract to take a job as an assistant secretary at the Chicago YMCA for $83 per month. This allowed him to minister to men who were at low places in their lives. Many were suffering from alcohol abuse. In 1893, he became an assistant to evangelist J. Wilbur Chapman. And when Chapman returned to a regular church pastorate in 1896, Billy decided to establish his own ministry.
America needs a tidal wave of the old-time religion. America needs to be taken down to God's bathhouse and the hose turned on her. And the time isn't far distant when the wheels of God's judgment are going to go sweeping through this old God-hating world.
Now, Billy Sunday was known for his physical stunts during his sermons. He would get a running start, and he would slide across stage as if he were sliding into home. Sometimes he would become so excited that he would climb up on top of the pulpit and preach from there. He was also known as a staunch advocate for the temperance movement and Prohibition. He was also an advocate for manliness. As quoted by Margaret Lambert's Bendroth, Billy Sunday said that Christianity was not a pale, effeminate proposition, and that Jesus was no ascetic, but a robust, red-blooded man who lived life to the full. Despite his focus on manliness, according to Timothy Larson, Billy was a persistent and outspoken supporter of women's suffrage. He said, "I always did think it was a funny law that would let an old whiskey-soaked chopped lobster of a ward healer vote and keep a bright, snappy, keen, educated woman away from the polls. There was often a temperance angle with almost everything that where Billy Sunday was concerned. In 1908, Nell Sunday joined Billy's ministry as his business manager and expanded his operation. This allowed Billy Sunday's revivals to boom. In the early years, Sunday toured mostly in small towns. His revival crusades were usually under large canvas tents, as there was often not a large enough building available for him. He usually set up the tent himself and slept in it. One night in 1906 in Salida, Colorado, after a large snowstorm, his tent collapsed. Thereafter, he insisted that a venue called a tabernacle be built for him in each city. In 1907, the weight of traveling and separation was taking a toll on both Billy and Nell. So in 1908, they placed their children in the care of a nanny, and Nell Sunday officially became the manager for the revivals, traveling with Billy. Nell hired staff, including Homer Roadheaver and Virginia Healy Asher. Roadheaver led the music ministry of the revivals, and Asher directed the women's ministries. This allowed Billy to focus his energies on his preaching. Nell began booking Sunday's revivals in larger towns, expanding the ministry to bigger crowds. It seems likely that Billy Sunday reached his level of renown due to Nell's management of his revival ministry. Harry Monroe, the street preacher in Chicago who converted Billy, called him the greatest evangelist since Martin Luther. It's been estimated that Billy Sunday preached to over 100 million people during his ministry, grasping the hands of all races, creeds, and classes, and is credited with nearly 250,000 conversions. Nell Sunday took this thrown together at every stop styled ministry and turned it into a finely tuned business as well as an effective mission. They also prospered financially. Sunday biographer Lyle Dorset estimated that Billy Sunday earned at least $1 million during the years that Nell managed the crusade. Nell made some investments, such as buying land, and they dressed well, but for the most part, the Sundays were not extravagant spenders. In fact, Billy Sunday was known to give away a lot of his money. Naturally, Billy had lots of critics. Progressive pastors of the day were critical of of his fundamentalism and lack of focus on social justice. Reverend Paul Blansford of Tampa, Florida, blasted him in a 1916 sermon for, among other things, being too effective in getting people to focus on heaven. He repeated a charge that Sunday was a one-man strike breaker, and strangely alleged that wherever Sunday has gone, he has fixed the attention of working men so exclusively upon heaven that they have forgotten the fight for social justice here on earth. Nell Sunday's contribution to the world through her husband's ministry had a personal price tag, however. Of their 4 children, just one, their only daughter, Helen, was raised by her. Helen died at the age of 42 of what is now believed to have been multiple sclerosis. The sons all were known to have heavily indulged in activities their father preached against, and all died tragic deaths, with one possibly taking his own life. George, the eldest son, worked for the Sunday organization for a time until 1917, when he served as an officer in the Army Aviation Corps in World War I. Upon his return, he encountered problems including alcoholism, multiple failed marriages. He died in 1933 from a fall from a high-rise apartment balcony in California. It was never determined if it was accidental, murder, or suicide. But alcohol was a factor. Now, George's second son, John, Billy and Nell's grandson, died the next year in 1934 at the age of 18 in an automobile accident. Now, Billy Jr. played piano for the Sundays briefly in the early 1920s. He also developed a problem with alcohol and had 4 failed marriages. He died in 1938 when he drove his car into a telephone pole after an all-night party in Palm Springs, California. Paul also indulged heavily in drinking. He referred to himself as Saloon Paul in a note in one of his school yearbooks. He also gambled and had multiple failed marriages, just like his brothers. Paul at least died a little less scandalously. He was killed in a plane crash while serving as a test pilot for Lockheed during World War II in 1944. Their family line apparently died out with the childless death of their only great-grandchild, Marcus Ashley Sunday, in 1982 when he was shot by his common-law wife. Billy Sunday's ministry began to wane after World War I. Some suggest that the rise of radio may have played a role in this. In a sermon in Dodge City, Kansas, near the famous Boot Hill Cemetery, Billy Sunday said in a speech directed at God, "I'm going to keep on the firing line for you, and when you see fit to call 3 strikes and out, Bill, I'll quit and crawl into my coffin." Billy Sunday's third strike was called November 6, 1935. Nell Sunday carried on her own ministry for 22 years after Billy's death. She preached, mentored, and raised funds for Christian organizations through the remainder of her life. She was a frequent guest at Bob Jones College, where she received an honorary degree in 1940 and spoke in some of Billy Graham's early crusades. She famously once interrupted the president of the Grace Theological Seminary during her introduction and said, "You sit down now so I can talk to these young people about the Lord," which is exactly what she did until the end of her life on February 20th, 1957. Now, one can't help but wonder if Billy Sunday's support for women's suffrage may have been influenced by the clear wisdom that he saw in his own wife. Now, thank you for listening.